ideas I'm presenting you are, you can say, some ideas that were developed as part of this project, and we couldn't have developed these ideas without us coming together and sharing our thoughts and ideas. Um, Also to say that, we started off this morning, getting into the facts, and I hope that what I'm going to share with you is the beginning of how can we, move forward. What can we do together to make a change? And you can say that career guidance is like a learning-oriented and action-oriented profession. We make changes through helping people in their careers. So this is what I'm going to share with you. So I'm going to take you back to when I was a career guidance practitioner myself. Now I'm an associate professor at the University College in Aarhus. So I teach and train at our diploma program in career guidance and do research and development and things like that. But before that, I was a career guidance practitioner myself. And I just want to share with you, like, when I first started thinking about, getting these small feelings of unease in career guidance practice. So yes, what made me start to thinking about the lack of sustainability and in environmental considerations in career guidance. So I would be in my office. We had like in the guidance center I used to work in. It was like a guidance shop where you can come in and have a talk with a career guidance practitioner. And there I will meet people who would say, I want to work in the oil industry. And I would go, well, okay, that sounds like a really interesting career. And I would sort of feel a little unease about it because, already thinking about, is that a sustainable production form, a sustainable industry? But as a career guidance practitioner, I would move forward and say, so what is your motivation for going into this career? And they will say, well, I can make lots of money, and I can have, I'll spend 2 weeks on the oil platform, and then I'll have 2 weeks off, and this will be a great balance of my career, because then I, work hard, and then I have time off. And I would say, well, that sounds like a wonderful idea, but feeling this little bit of unease about this career idea. Then I would meet other people saying like, I feel burned out from working all day in front of my computer. I feel like I'm, wasting my life. I could be out there and experiencing the seasons, and I would go, yes, I understand that, because I'm also tired of sitting in front of a computer all day. But they will say, yeah, but you don't know. I'm dying. I'm dying inside. I really need to do something else with my career. So these two examples, I feel like are examples of thinking about the labor market and career guidance in a different way. And I think these experiences, they started to shift my focus towards how career guidance should respond to a labor market that actually perhaps is pushing both planet and people out of balance. And when I was taking my own master's degree in career guidance, I met Peter Plant, who was the one who coined the term green guidance and started talking about this idea. And that really resonated with me, like a practice that sort of sits in between individual and society, which was also like the origin of career guidance, that career guidance has this role between individual and society. And now that we have a new societal challenge, well, career guidance should again offer its best way forward. Like how can we work in this as a profession? So after learning about this idea and also working more intensely with teaching and training students, I've been trying to advance the thinking and develop like very concrete methodology so practitioners can get to work with this ever since. So I'm just gonna fix my hair up here. So, thank you. Yeah, I'm being recorded, so yeah. Yeah. Okay, so there is a lot to think about. There really is a lot to think about, and especially going on, talking on the topic of individual autonomy, because individual autonomy is really like central ethos in the career guidance profession. So what about individual autonomy in your career? This is a really difficult matter. I was telling you about the guy wanting to go into the oil industry, and me feeling a little bit of unease, because we're used to having this very strong idea of individual autonomy, like you do you, it's your career, what do you want to do, and this is really in the DNA of a career guidance practice. Another thing to think about here is also the impartiality of the career guidance practitioner. Should I be the one interfering in other people's career plans? If they feel like I'm really motivated for this, I can really balance my work and my family life like this, who am I to interfere? So there really is a lot to think about here. So we shouldn't run away from this. We should be staying with the trouble, as American philosopher Donna Haraway is educating us, because we want to run away from these things, and sometimes these are also barriers. Like I can't. Individual autonomy is so important. Career impartiality is so important. So I can't, I can't ask questions. I can't challenge what the individual is telling me about their careers. But she's saying we should try to stay with the trouble. So what is the trouble here? And the trouble here is we should avoid placing blame on the individual or becoming moral judges, because that guy who wants to go into the oil industry, he's just pursuing a job that the system, the industrial system, production systems, labor market, it has produced. And it's the system which Richard was telling us about before, it's the system that is not working. So it's not, the fault of the individual that there is this job that he can take. However, because that's the trouble, it's still our responsibility. And I'm going to share a sentence with you from the Danish, because I'm from Denmark, but also because it's true. A sentence from the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, who says, well, it's not your fault, but it's still your responsibility. And I think there's a lot of truth here for us as practitioners and scholars to think about with this sentence here. It's not your fault, it's still your responsibility. And in these matters, everything counts, everything matters. The small, the banana peel that you wanted to throw out, when you throw it in the right bin, or you throw it out, in a hedge and it becomes soil again, that is important. Everything is important. That was just a very small example. But everything is important here. Everything matters. And this is due to our entanglement with the world. And this is what Richard was telling us about, that we are entangled. So the problem with the planet, it's not out there, it is here. The call is coming from inside the house, right? It's here. So that means if I act right here, it will matter. So the problem here is, of course, that the individual is, very much alone in their endeavors here. So we have to think about how can we as a profession, come together and do something about this as a profession. Yeah, you're doing a real good job back there. Okay, so I brought this graphic as well. I think it's an important graphic with the planetary boundaries, and I think it's something for all career practitioners to get familiarized with, because the problem is real, and I'm going to talk about this in a slightly different way than Richard was before, because I'm going to put this into a context of individual career. So the problem is real. We just learned about it this morning. When a planetary crisis becomes personal, 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries have been exceeded, and this means that more people working in the oil industry, of course it will affect the climate. And then you can say, well, if I don't take the job in the oil industry, another person will take that job. Yes, that's the trouble. That's the trouble that we shouldn't run away from. There's a trouble here. But the more people working in the oil industry, it will affect the climate. And right now in Denmark, we could see in one of the graphics that Richard brought, I could see Denmark is not a place with drought right now. There's a lot of water in Denmark. We have a really big increase in precipitation, so water coming down from the sky. And Denmark also has a lot of coastline. So we have water coming in from the coast because the water levels are rising, and Denmark is quite flat. Because of the precipitation, the groundwater level is rising up as well. So we have water coming in from the sky, from the sea, from the earth. There's water everywhere. And this means that, doesn't matter where you sit with this kind of information in Denmark in terms of sustainability, almost everyone will be affected by water in the basement. This is something we understand in Denmark. Water in the basement, very serious. Climate, migration, we haven't thought about that, but water in the basement, this is real. We're experiencing it, and we worry about it because we keep a lot of important stuff in our basement, and then it gets flooded, and will the insurance company, will they, pay our money back, stuff like that. So this is where it, gets real in Denmark. It's when you have water in the basement. And then when this person is going out wants to work at the oil platform, I'm thinking, okay, so more people, including this career practitioner, will also get water in the basement. So this is like a very concrete effect of I'm sending this person, and I'm not saying, oh, that's a very great career plan you have there, but it will have that consequence that my water level will come up in my basement. And guess what? When that guy is coming back from his 2 weeks work in the oil platform, he'll come back to his basement. His basement will be flooded too, So this this is when a planetary crisis becomes personal, and this, you know, really can make us think about, like, what is it our role is between individual and society here. Um, because individual career choices, they are not just personal, they have collective consequences, and they affect others, and they also affect, you know, ourselves. The guy going out to the oil platform, he is affecting himself. So what he thinks is a very good career for him is also giving him a flooded basement. So this is the trouble we're in career guidance. Yeah. So this means that we as a profession, we should try to help people to, you know, actually realize this through learning and how to think systemically, how things are connected. And this is the educational dimension. So now we're moving into the 5 dimensions of environmentally sustainable career guidance. We need to help people to cope with anxiety, worry, by developing their groundedness and connection to others and also to nature. So this is the affective dimension. We need to help people, you know, to what should we do by helping them think creatively and trying to invent the future we wish for. So this is the transformational dimension. And we want to help people to work together by connecting people in communities and helping them develop something of importance to them. So this is the social ecological dimension. And then, of course, also here we need to help people to think critically by thinking and discussing values, norms, ethics, not to impose our own thoughts on this, but to help the client develop their own standpoint in this. So this is the important part here, also regarding impartiality, that we should help people to develop a stance here. And this is what we call the political ideological dimension. So environmentally sustainable career guidance is not just one thing, it has 5 dimensions. And this is an outcome of a piece of research that I did with Tristan Hooley, who you're going to meet later today. And we developed these ideas from discussing in the project group and then also doing a research work. We did a narrative literature review, and we hope that our article will be in the public domain very soon, where you can read more thoroughly about these dimensions. But I'm going to talk you and walk you through the 5 dimensions. So first, before I go into the dimensions, I would just say that when Tristram and I, we made this work, we wanted to be very concrete, like really, you know, put precision and clarity into the field, because we could see in the literature that people have different ideas what green guidance is and what sustainable guidance is, and we were thinking about wording, and we were thinking about how can we sort of define this practice. And it's not like we're stepping away from green guidance being a really good umbrella term here. But it's just, we have to be very careful, you know, with the words and what we think is important here. So we wanted to put environment into our definition here, because environment will give us a focus of it's a planetary situation that we are addressing. But we also wanted to put sustainable word here, because we wanted to show how things are interconnected. Because if you just focus on one, you'll lose sight of the other, and it's like the connections between the different compartments in the world and in the labor market, education system. These were important. So we made this definition. I'm not going to read it out aloud to you because it will take me forever. So you can take a picture of it and then you can discuss it with some colleagues or read it before you go to sleep or in the morning as well. Yes. So here's the affective dimension. And the affective dimension, as you probably guessed, has something to do with how people they feel facing planetary crisis. And they, experience different feelings when you're in a constantly changing world, a world of social acceleration. You feel stressed, you feel burnout, maybe you experience climate anxiety, worry. So we wanted to say, okay, so if this is the situation, what is the career guidance response to this? And this is why we, in all dimensions, we put in a learning area. So this is how to operationalize the dimension. So the learning area here for the affective dimension is connecting career with the world. So this could mean in a career guidance response that we use nature as a guidance setting. We use existential grounding inspired approaches. We work with craft approaches. It's very popular in Denmark. And we work with collective and group-based settings where it has a good resonance or a good basis for universality and hope. So these are ways of helping people connecting their careers with the world. So the social ecological dimension. This dimension highlights that we are all embedded in ecosystems. We might not be aware of it, but we are. So this is something that is important here, that we help people to realize this, that we're part of like ecological systems, but these are also tied to other humans in the ecosystem. The dimension highlights embeddedness in ecosystems and the need for collective awareness and action for planetary and human well-being. So the learning area here for the social ecological dimension is how do we help people build solidarity with the world through careering. So this means that a concrete response for a practitioner here could be having a community-based focus. It could be here in this community center. How can we live together here? Taking care of the marginalized and threatened life forms. So here we are extending. It's not only people, it's also the habitats, like something that we care about here. So people groups, nature, species, habitats, part of the local ecosystem. And then, working together to understand which actions are needed to contribute to socially and environmentally sustainable community for humans and all things living. Yes. The educational dimension here focuses on understanding how the world of work impacts the environment by identifying careers that contribute to the green transition, like very quickly summed up. And the learning area here is learn about careers in a sustainable world. And this is like a green guidance classic. I would say this is where Peter Plant's ideas sort of emerged, that we need to learn about how careers are, impacting the planet in different ways. So the career guidance response here is exploring connections between climate and environmental crisis, the production systems, the world of work, exploring environmental impacts of different career paths, and also with a strong focus on quality labor market information. What are the green skills needed in these professions, and also like transversal skills, like sometimes we think about that green skills are particular skills, but there are also some very general skills here. So this will be an important factor too. Okay, moving on to the transformational dimension. So this dimension emphasizes using sociological and ecological imagination, using your imagination, because this will help us to make the transformation of society that we need. Um, so it's a transformational agency connected to our way of careering. So the learning area here is imagine and invent the world as your career. So response areas could be activities focusing on imagining and inventing a vocational future worth hoping for, um, making inventions for the future, working with scenario building and backcasting, like thinking about what would be like an ideal working situation and living situation, not just for me, but for my community. And then backcasting, like going back and saying, okay, so what are sort of the steps I need to take to go to that scenario? It's a very powerful way of working, and it's a way we're used to working in career guidance as well. So taking it into this setting is quite valuable. So the final dimension here is the political ideological dimension. And this dimension has to do with understanding, helping the client understand the social political context that they're in, context of sustainability, and supporting them in forming their own positions, developing their own standpoints. And supporting clients in critically discussing and making career choices, balancing personal well-being and planetary well-being. How can we try to balance both? So the learning area here is how can we help people change the world through their careers, and discussing this. So concrete responses, like we use systemic practices, where people, they can see the connections between different compartments in their life and in the world and the production system. It could be critical interrogation of dominant and emergent political societal ideologies. What is behind this? Who, I'm searching for the word. Who gets a profit out of this ideology? And critical interrogation, like what's behind this ideology. Discuss values, norms, ethics, and develop the client's own standpoint in relation to this. And also here's where you can discuss impartiality and transparency openly with the client. So when you want to design a career guidance activity, we should look to the dimensions here and say, okay, what do you want to help the client or group of clients with? What is the target group? What are they interested in? What are their thoughts? What are the worries? And then you might say, okay, maybe it's particularly one or two dimensions that we want to zoom in on. Maybe it's all 5 of them, that maybe you're creating like a course, a career education course, and you want to, have all the dimensions present. But it's not like a complete list of ingredients. It's like you can think about these dimensions and then think about which ones do I want to add or work with in this concrete activity. So what do you want to help the client or group of clients with? And thinking about these dimensions, then you can also think about the learning areas connected to these dimensions. So going from the affective dimension, connect career with the world, social, ecological dimension, I can help people build solidarity with the world through careering. If it's the educational, I can help people learn about careers in a sustainable world. it's the transformational, I can help people imagine and invent what is your career. And if it's the political, ideological one, you can help design an activity where you help people think about, discuss, critically engage in how to change the world through career. We put these dimensions into a framework here, and just briefly say a little about this framework. Here on the top bar here it says preconditions, and what we could see in the literature was that the literature stresses that it's really important that careers practitioners, they prepare for this practice. You have to prepare, and that is, understanding and communicating environmental issues, and also to be reflexive about ethics, norms, and ideology. So here we need, as practitioners, to expand our knowledge capacity a little bit, because we're in a situation where this has to do with the labor market and the education system. So we don't have to be climate experts or biodiversity experts, but we probably need to familiarize ourselves with the topics of environmental issues connecting to the labor market and the education system. So this is a small expansion here. We need to learn a little bit more, but also the other part here, how can we help be reflexive about norms, ethics, ideology. So we put the different dimensions in here with the learning areas. So you could see, like, what are we aiming for as practitioners? What are we aiming for? We're aiming for these different learning areas. And when we are designing our activities, we think about which learning areas do I want to work with. And then we think about the next thing, which pedagogies will we be using. And there we could see in the literature that, many different pedagogies can be used here. Constructivist, existentialist, narrative approaches, scenario building, and many different approaches can be used here. We could, however, also see that a lot of approaches informed by critical theory seem to emerge, because they have this, change, transformation, gearing in them. So they might be very useful here. And moving on to how do we then work with these approaches, we could see in the literature that there was, a lot of focus on this practice could work well in collectives, in communities, in groups. Mostly because a lot of this is really good it's really valuable to discuss with other people, and also you need to connect with other people. You can't make a change alone, you can change together with people, but of course you can also work with this in an individual session. So here it is, our framework. Yeah, so 5 dimensions of environmentally sustainable career guidance. I hope you are inspired from this and you can use it in your practice and start designing really cool and fun activities that will engage people. So when I'm closing my presentation now, I'll just ask you what inspired you the most during this presentation, and then in a little bit you can share it with the person next to you and keep the discussion going. So I'll just say thank you for listening, and I put in my references here, so you can get inspired. So thank you for listening.